Good afternoon, I am Abby Goldie, Head of Business Support at Downtown in Business, and welcome to the Downtown Den, a virtual nook for businesses and Babs alike to come together during these unprecedented times. Today I'm joined by Ben and Antony, two ex-Royal Marines and co-founders at Find Your Ed Coaching. Today they're going to be talking to us about personal accountability and a bit about their careers and what strategies we can apply to this situation we're in now. So if I could start with Ben, if you could just give me sort of your thoughts of the pandemic as you see it.
Oh, where do we start? My thoughts on it. My thoughts are, I've got many thoughts to think about it right now, but to not overcomplicate things and to get through situations like this, we need to simplify our thoughts and make them basic. And now that's exactly what's being asked upon us, basically, to stay at home, stay out of the way, and get through the next couple of months. My thoughts get drawn more towards the people which are continuing to go about with a bit of negligence towards the situation and thinking that it's not going to affect them. And it's not something I'm going to really harp on about as well, because it has been harped on about a lot recently. It's simply stay at home. And I think why it bears so much relevance into where our backgrounds are is that we used to fight for one another, brothers or sisters on the front line, knowing the consequences, knowing what we had to do, what the reasons behind what we were doing. And there was a huge degree of acceptance there as well. And I think I personally feel that one or two people might be worried about the change, whereas really we need to accept the change. It's going to happen. It is happening. And today life is a bit different for now, but it's very quick for human beings to find a new way of being, and I think people need to accept that quite quickly. So what I mean by that is it takes around 30 to 66 days to create a new habit. So that's all we're doing right now, is we're creating new habits within our life. And right now, being at home with the kids and running a business seems a bit difficult. But in a week, it'll feel quite normal. In 2 weeks, it'll feel even more normal. 3 or 4 weeks, it'll be a normal routine. And strangely, we won't like going back to the old way of being. So I think my personal opinion on the situation is it's here. There's nothing we can do about it. And the quicker we can accept it and start moving forward, the quicker it will actually go. Because when we accept, we'll take accountability for the situations we're all in, we'll socially distance ourselves, we'll stay at home, and we'll beat the virus. So that's where I'm kind of thinking with it at the moment.
And what are your thoughts, Anthony?
Probably not too dissimilar from Ben's, really. It's that realization that this is currently happening and taking place in the moment, and we need to realize that we have arrived at that point where we need to take action, if not before. And we have to have that realization that we are all in this together. That will be the turning point, because ultimately, if you ignore and think that you're the only person self-isolating. Now, I'm sure there are many people who get the idea of community and that community spirit, but there are quite a few people who are just ignoring the fact that this is going on. And I think there's a key part of that is understanding that perhaps that's how some people deal with it in terms of the denial phase. You know, this denial of it actually happening. That's the way in which they cope with these really terrible situations, but they have to go through this process of acceptance first, and then from that point of acceptance, that's when you can start to remove that element of emotion and then adapt to the current situation. Because ultimately, so many people have talked about change, people don't like change, but we have to absolutely change. And it's not just that individual team going through change or that particular business. The whole country is going through a mass period of transition to whatever it will look like in the future. And I think that sense of community spirit really needs to be passed around as much as we possibly can, and also take that accountability for ourselves in conducting our own actions, but equally being conscious of that responsibility to one another within our society.
Okay, fantastic. And obviously you guys have been through some quite tough times in you know your careers as you know Royal Marines. Have you got Ben any examples that you can draw on that you think you know might be not too dissimilar from the actions that we have to take in this scenario?
So yeah, the situations are completely different, obviously, and and everyone realizes that. I think another point that I'd just like to reference from the military is that we signed up. Um, so we kind of knew what we were getting ourselves into. One thing that the human race has not signed up to is this. So there is that immediate, I understand that the adversity we've been through as Marines was sort of partially put on by ourselves because we put ourselves in this situation. The fact that COVID's come looking for us is far more daunting and very scary, and not a lot of people haven't signed up for this. But as humans, we all sign up for adversity, I suppose. So we must accept at some point it's going to come along. You know, there's many military sort of themed anecdotes that you kind of use to get through this. When I was in Afghanistan in 2011, the IED threat was at its all-time highest, which means it wasn't necessarily the ambushes that were the scary thing, waiting to get hit by the enemy, because we had intelligence and you can often sense that. And you could also deflect enemy ambushes at certain points. What you could never deflect was not knowing where you're putting your feet, and your feet stepping on an IED and it exploding beneath you. And it was called the silent hidden killer, which is now what we have within this country. So we would stay in the base, and then when it was time to go on patrol, you would go onto patrol fearing where you put your feet. That was it. But you had almost no control over it. You could look for ground signs. You can use the metal detector to see possibly where the IEDs may be laid. But at the end of the day, it became a little bit of potluck. Now, we couldn't function properly as Marines if you were constantly fearing that, constantly worrying, constantly stressed, constantly thinking, oh, if I put my foot here, it might explode. You just had to kind of get on with it. You had to take the precautions you could to try and eliminate the IED threat. But at the end of the day, you just had to get on with it. Otherwise, you couldn't concentrate on the task at hand. And I suppose, you know, that comparable way of thinking is that that's where we're at now. You know, there's a silent killer out there which is transitioning from person to person at an alarming rate. You know, our ability to not get hit by this virus is to stay away from it, which means staying in our own homes and isolating ourselves, but also the fear of what if, you know, and the uncertainty of when's this going to end. You know, it's back to operations in Afghanistan. You never kind of knew when anything was going to end, so you had to just get on with it. And I know that sounds really blunt. It's not the nicest thing to always say, but when I say we just have to get on with it, it is a case of we have to accept the situations here, respond effectively, and adapt to the situation. Otherwise, we will spend too much time chasing our tails, worrying where it might come from, trying to see the end, see where it's actually going to finish, when we're going to flatten the curve, as they say, and then get out the trees. What we need to concentrate on right now is very basic human behaviors, which is just getting through each day. So yeah, I can completely relate to certain situations in Afghanistan that's now sort of coming to light now. It's a mindset game. All it is a mindset game. And if people have their minds in the right place for this, they will get through it without problem. And the biggest thing will be growth that comes from this. People's ability to realize how resilient they are as people and what they could possibly achieve for a positive after this period of adversity.
Right. And Anthony, what about yourself?
Yeah, I think just touching on what Ben has said there, this idea of growth through adversity, sort of adversarial growth is what we like to call it within Find Your Edge. And if you look throughout history and in recent times and much beyond that, there is this period that individuals or groups or teams go through this great hardship, and they actually come out better at the back end of it, more unity between one another. And I think that's something that we really want to look at the back end of this. Look for the positives after COVID-19 has happened, accept that we're going through it, manage our way through it. It's going to be tough, it's going to be rough, and you know, we're going to have to do all of the things we don't want to do during this time. But ultimately, the back end of it, that's when the true growth will happen. That's when we've got a real big opportunity for innovation now. I've already seen pictures of the 3D printing that's taking place in Italy for the masks that were coming from Decathlon, I think it was, and they basically 3D printed these ventilator bits on top. So that's great innovation, and I think, you know, it's almost just forcing through lots of change which hasn't had to happen before. But touching on, again a little bit on what Ben has said, is this idea of removing that emotional element to, or emotional response to what's going on. You need to constantly keep your emotions in check, hence the sort of mindset element to this. And I noticed it today when I was going through into Tesco. Things were even more sparse than what they were before, and I kind of had to check myself, thinking, yes, there's a lot of scarcity that's happening in the shop right now, but I need to not be taking more than what I currently can afford to take, in terms of at the detriment of others. And I think people need to keep themselves in check. That's the biggest thing, and not rise to this emotional response. Would be take as much as we possibly can whilst we're shopping, but actually the longer term and of this is no, that's not the right thing to do. And having that in the back of your mind, if it feels right, then you are probably right. If you feel it's wrong, then you're also probably right. Kind of getting into that mindset. And yeah, this is a huge test for us as a society. But as Ben said, I do think that there are great opportunities on the other side of this.
Well, thank you. And now going back to sort of your day job, really, with Find Your Edge Consulting. So it's not our first rendezvous, as it were. You guys have done events for us at a time when people could get together. And I've heard you guys talk a lot about using strategy to overcome adversity, particularly ARA. So Anthony, if you want to tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I mentioned it briefly earlier, so I'm happy to pass this one over to Ben to really sort of take the bull by the horns and take it to the next stage.
Yeah, ARA came around through reflection and what we have as a Marines ethos. And so a point in case for me was when we lost a lad in Afghanistan. We were only 5 minutes into a 24-hour operation, and the idea, or the operation strategy, was to be quite kinetic, which is a sort of military term for it's kicking off, and to get quite violent with the enemy. So to lose a lad to an improvised explosive device which killed him and injured 2 others with him was quite a difficult thing, quite a horrible pill to swallow, especially when you know you've still got 24 hours, so 23 hours and 55 minutes left of the operation. What you can't do is take your foot off the gas. You can't become emotionally entwined with that situation. You have to go through a process and allow you to function correctly. And we now coin it within our business as ARA, and we teach it as strategy, because it's accept, remove unwanted emotion, and adapt to the situation. The acceptance is to instantly admit that the situation has happened. So when adversity strikes, you have to accept it struck. We all go through many things in our life, which is something I'll bring back to in a minute, where we have to accept it's happened. Sometimes acceptance can be delayed when we have attached emotion to it. So emotion, I'm not saying be emotionless. That's not what we try to get across to people, because at the same time, we always need emotion. And if you lost a loved one or someone became directly affected with this virus, you have every right to be emotional about the situation. But emotion, unwanted emotion, drives exactly the things Tomo was saying about. It drives people to hoard and into a survival mode that they don't necessarily need to go into, because that threat isn't there for them yet. You know, the shops have remained open. You can still go and buy all your groceries now. And that's an emotional response. Emotional response is also related to stress, anxiety, and worry. And what if this gets me? Well, if you do the right precautions, it's likely not to get you. So you can think with clarity there. When you're emotional about things as well, it drives stress, which then affects our sleep, which then affects our all-round health and well-being, which then in turn affects our immune system. If there is ever a time to be emotionally detached from a situation so we can sleep and live better, it is now, because it will keep our immune system stronger, which will then help us fight the virus if you accidentally or unfortunately come into contact with it. So we need to concentrate on removing unwanted emotion at this time, which is which gets driven by looking at the press too much, go on social media, looking into it, trying to find the facts, the correct facts, what's the fiction, opinions. We do need to distance ourselves. We need to know the protocol, we need to know what we're doing, and we need to distance ourselves from the information in order to stay safe. We know what we need to do now. We need to clean ourselves and stay distant from one another. That's pretty much as simple as it gets. So that then brings on adapt. So we adapt to that situation. We have to stay at home. We have to leave our jobs behind, unfortunately. And I've had lots of people come to us, and some quite heatedly through social media, saying, it's easy for you. Some of us are self-employed and we have to go out of work. Well, guess what? We're self-employed and our business has taken a massive whack. So we're completely empathise with people which are struggling to adapt to the situation, but you have to adapt. Your life needs to adapt. You have to work with your children now to adapt. So the 3 simple processes sort of have come from the battlefield: accept the situation's happened, remove the unwanted emotions so you can think with clarity and adapt to the situation. And I just want to refer back to a point which I raised quickly then, which I think we should all consider, is as individuals, we have all been through far worse adversity than what's going on right now. Every single person has lost someone close. Every single person would have been through something very tragic within a career or life. Everyone has experienced adversity. So what we need to remind ourselves is our strength of mind has always been there to get through this situation. The daunting and worrying thing now is that it's on a collective basis. It's a national, global problem, which makes it clearly seem far bigger. But mentally, on the spot, your mindset can get you through the situation because it has got you through similar situations before, which has happened just singly in your life. So we need to remind ourselves of that, because that in turn will help us accept, remove unwanted emotion and adapt to the situation.
Right. And then something else that you guys have touched on in events we've done before, which I've always been a fan of, is is it mental fitness you call it, or mental wellness? What are some of your top tips for people at this time? Anthony, if you will.
Mental fitness, well, that primarily is all linked to ensuring that you're getting the right content going on in your mind. Because if you think about fitness in a health term, like you would assume going down the gym, eating healthily, greens, sorting out your diet, whereas we decided to change the language around mental health. It all comes from mental health. Mental fitness is another way in which you can term mental health. When you say to somebody mental health, they automatically think anxiety, stress, depression, all of the negatives associated with that. Well, if you reframe the word or reframe the phrase, then you can actually replace that negative thought pattern with something positive, i.e. if you change to mental fitness, then you start thinking all of the positives at the back of that, and that is ensuring that you're keeping guard at the door of your mind. So by that we mean not allowing consistent negativity to go into your mind. If you're always fixated on Twitter 24/7, and then you go on to BBC News, then you look at all the news channels, then you listen to it in your car, now you're just surrounding yourself with all of the bad stuff that is in and around this coronavirus, of which there is much, and indeed is probably going to get much worse. However, you need to check yourself, or a recommendation would be to check yourself on how much you're actually letting pour into your mind. Equally, keeping your mind active with books, with different kind of creative jobs, or indeed things that you can do around the house, playing music or whatever it might be. But one of the key aspects of this is the physiological element as well. It's very, very difficult to have a healthy mind without a healthy body. So, going out for that one piece of exercise that we're all allowed, it is so crucial. It does 2 things really. It pumps the blood around the body, letting it become oxygenated, and also you have that opportunity to just sort of connect with your surroundings, and that's so important for mental fitness. We don't really have enough time on this call to get into it. However, it is just making some choices which are going to make you feel better inside. Ben, I don't know if you want to add to that at all.
No, yeah, sorry, I do actually. Yeah, very briefly, we're spending a lot of time at home now. All of us, for some of us, are spending a lot of time on our own. I've already noticed that the days seem quite longer. We're running the business from home now. We're doing a lot of online coaching with people. We're still trying to strategize things, content right, and then also now we have 2 children at home, which need to be taught up to September. So life is all of a sudden very difficult, and there's all of a sudden a lot of stresses within some of our homes. So we need to give ourselves this time to also be a bit selfish and realize that we're all in this together, which means your wife, your husband, your children need their own time, as do you, because self-improvement, self-development is a selfish word. We should be giving ourselves a few hours of this time to go and do some exercise, which, as Tom has just alluded to, really wakes up the body, which in turn wakes up the mind. We still need to do goal setting as well. Goal setting makes us feel good. So we should be at home setting daily, not schedules. I'm not really a big fan of dedicated schedules for each day. In my own family, we sort of like to be flexible, but we all want to achieve something within the day because it makes us feel good. And what we got to work on, and which is what I alluded to earlier, is that we can't see the finish line of this beast. We don't know when it is. People speculate that it could be 3, 6, 12 weeks away. It could be all the way up to next year, which means there is no finish line, which means we have nothing to focus on. But what we can focus on is the end of each day and just getting through each one. And how can we grow from this? I think it's a horrible thing what's happening right now, but we've all been gifted an opportunity at the same time, much to the sacrifice of the people which are unfortunately now laying down their lives. But many of us complain we don't have enough time. Many of us complain we don't see our children enough. Many of us complain that we don't have enough time to write the book or study the course or learn the guitar that we've wanted to do for years. And guess what? We've got lots of time now to not only work from home, but we can also sit at home and learn the things that we wanted to learn for a while, and do a bit of self-investment. So we can make light of a very negative situation. And this all in turn helps upstairs.
Great. Thank you guys. I think we've had some really good tips there. Just one last thing before we go today. We've talked a lot about goal setting and also using this time to our advantage. So if you two got any goals that you've set yourself for this time, Ben?
Oh, Tomo? Oh.
Yeah, all right.
Tomo, go first. I know he likes this one.
Yeah, it's really one of the things I have not neglected, but neglected due to how busy we are, is the amount I read. I thoroughly enjoy reading, and I've got a few books stacked up prior to COVID-19 that I've been meaning to get through. I've kind of opened the first few pages. I do also listen to quite a lot because I'm on the go quite frequently. But in terms of my immediate goals is to get through 3 books which have been sort of sat on my bookshelf for about the last 3-4 months. And for me, I think this is a great opportunity because ultimately, it's not all about the professional skill. It's not all about the hard skills that we're learning. It's often we're focusing on the sort of soft and inner skills. And these books really, I believe, can help increase your own understanding of soft skill and inner skill as well. I think throughout most books, if you're reading a challenging book, then it increases your understanding. So I understand that there's a call for facts and figures and all those types of things, where those are all readily available. But I think if you can increase your understanding, you get a greater appreciation and perspective on things that are happening around the world, and including COVID-19. So for me, that's my major goal over the next few weeks, is to get those books complete.
And Ben?
Yeah, I've got a couple which are sort of aligned to different parts of life. So me and Tom have been working quite hard over the last year or so, 2 years. So spending a bit of time with the family is actually quite a nice goal, to be involved in one of them home tutoring lessons each day. I've got a guitar in the corner which I repeatedly play the same songs on every time I pick it up. So I've decided that I'm going to learn a new song every 2 weeks. And ensure that I exercise every day as well. So do my apocalypse garden workouts, which I'm calling them now, and doing something different, i.e. with the physical training, working from home. So there's a number of ones, and I've aligned them to different parts of my life. And the final one's building 1 workshop a week for our online academy, which is becoming quite rewarding, to say the least.
Well, fantastic. chaps, I won't keep you much longer, but thank you so much for your input. And
You've got to go back and parent now.
Take care.